Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, entrepreneurship, and marketing to help you harness your inner tenacity to drive your career forward. I'm excited to welcome my guest today, Bobby Soper, the International President at Mohegan Gaming and Entertainment, MGE for short. He has had an illustrious career filled with tons of learnings that I'm confident that you will gain a ton from. So let's jump in and get things going. Bobby, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, good stuff. And you've had a really interesting career, but let's hit this rewind button. Law school down in Georgia. Did you always want to be a lawyer? My wife's an attorney, and it's always one of those questions that she really can't put her finger on, but why law?
Yeah. No, Adam, good question. So the answer is no. That's the simple answer. Going through school, especially undergraduate school, I was focused on investment banking. I loved the finance world. I was an economics major with a BBA, and sort of looked at various alternatives. And I got to know one of the professors who was actually an attorney himself in securities law. Really caught on to what he was doing, what the opportunity was. Enjoyed studying, business law. And then I decided, look, let's give it a go, stay at the University of Georgia. They gave me a scholarship to go to law school. And, from there, it was law.
And was it ever a question of what kind of law? I mean, was it always business law? You never wanted to do trial and any of that criminal stuff?
Yeah. No, I did know that, right? I knew I was either going to go into investment banking or law and focus on securities law. Always wanted to be a transactional attorney. Wasn't interested in being in the courtroom.
That's really interesting. And the idea of working in the gaming industry, when did that first kind of come across your mind?
It never was my intent. And long story short, I'm actually a member of the Mohegan tribe, right? The last of the Mohegans, the Mohegan tribe out of Connecticut. My parents grew up near the reservation. My great-great-grandfather was a very influential chief for the tribe. And they moved down to Atlanta right before I was born, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. But I visited the Northeast, the tribe, for many years. My cousin, who was a manager of the tribe when the tribe launched its casino, asked me to come up there after I graduated from law school and said, look, why don't you give this a try? And, even though I was just got barred in Georgia, was going to be a securities lawyer actually in Atlanta, I fell in love with the casino environment. And so packed up everything, got married, and moved to Connecticut and started as in-house counsel for the Mohegan tribe.
So let's talk about being part of the tribe. I'm part of a different tribe, but you're part of the real tribe. How much of an influence was that on you? Growing up, the traditions and the culture and the importance of the continuation and growth and support of the Mohegan tribe.
Yeah, look, I'm very fortunate because there is a long history with Mohegans and understanding that culture, being able to participate in the powwows each year, having family very involved in the federal recognition process as I grew up. I got to learn a lot, right? And those lessons, bode well for the future. And one of the I think important traits of Mohegans is in the history is as a tribe, the relationships have always been important with the community, with the government, and the private sector. Right. And I learned that from the tribe. And so I think that helped me in my own career.
Do you remember? Let's go a little far back. I mean, what's one of the traditions of the Mohegan tribe culturally that really truly resonates with you the most?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot, right? I think, at the end of the day, I don't know if this is necessarily a tradition as much. There's a lot of specific traditions that are ceremonial in nature, but I think it really is that abiding by one's word, right? So the Mohegans, whether it's in business, whether it's in government, when they face challenges, we don't run away from those challenges, right? We live up to those challenges. Even in the bad times. And real quick example, in 2008, when the economy
Please.
fell off the cliff, many organizations in the gaming world, for example, were, defaulting on their debt and running away, right? We took it on. We took it in the chin, refinance, incurred a lot more expensive debt, right? Which we didn't have to at the time. But we never wanted to run away from those obligations. And I think, in the finance world, we're respected for that, right? And I think that's just really in our DNA, and it has been in our DNA for hundreds of years.
So you've been with the organization on and off for 20 plus years, right? I mean, it's a pretty impressive tenure, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's go back. When you first started, you're coming out of law school, you're getting involved in the gaming industry. What was one of those early tough lessons that you had to learn the hard way?
Oh yeah, there's a lot, right? There's a lot. Look, I was very fortunate because I got thrown in the fire. I had some great mentors, and I would say probably, and I use this as an example already. A lot of us learned this, but I think in 2008, right, where everybody's riding high, you can't screw up. Business is incredible.
Life was good.
Life is good. And we all give ourselves credit, like we're the ones creating, all the success, and you got sucker punched, right? And realize you're bloated with labor, you're inefficient, and it was an awakening. I think, certainly for myself as a leader in the organization, but across the industry, we saw that, and that I'll never forget that lesson, and hopefully it won't repeat itself.
We shall see. So getting back to your career journey, you were with the organization for a long time. In 2017, you took a step down. What led up to that? And I want to talk about how you've come full circle to return to the organization.
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, again, I've been so fortunate to work in my family's organization, starting as legal counsel. And then, I ended up in 2017 finishing my tenure as CEO of the company, and achieved, everything I wanted to achieve, including growing the company internationally. I think there were some differences of opinion, from a board perspective. I, always had this sort of entrepreneurial blood in me, and I was able to innovate all those years with a great team, surround myself with great people. So at that point, it just made sense for me to work for myself, right, as an owner of my own projects, of my own initiatives, which I've been doing for 4 years, and I'm glad, right? It's to learn more. I needed to learn more in a different sphere. And that really was the catalyst for me to get out of the corporate world, if you will.
And how have you brought both pieces back together under one umbrella?
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I have a number of great projects. I'm owner, board member, strategic partner on, not only in the gaming space, some of it in the gaming space, but in green energy, and I'm part of a team building a micro steel mill. But the chairman and vice chairman of
cool.
Mohegan, came back, asked me, and wondering if I would go back. And I said, look, I'm not interested in being, a CEO again of a corporate, entity. But look, I'm very passionate about our international projects, struggling a little bit on the financing side with our project in Korea. And so I'm, happy to assist in that way. And so they brought me on as international president, which I serve today. It doesn't exclude me from pursuing these other projects and sustaining these other projects. It keeps me open, but it's also an opportunity to help the tribe again.
Curious question here. What's your favorite Vegas casino gambling movie?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would probably say Casino. It's a classic, and has a lot of history that is relevant. I mean, there's scenes in there, just manual surveillance from the sky, right? It's true, right? I mean, there's a lot of glamour, a lot of Hollywood in it, but it's probably my favorite classic.
It's best you could share. Like, share with us just one absolutely crazy on the floor casino story that you witnessed firsthand.
I mean, there are so many.
Give us one of your party favorites that you love to share.
This, and this is probably the most remarkable when you look at just we'll call it odds. We had one player, a social worker, right? Probably made $35,000 a year, right? And this goes back a ways. And, started on I think it was a $25 blackjack table, right? And then, fast forward over the next 72 hours, they bankrolled very little money, probably $500 or $250 into something that became 7 digits, right? Literally $1 million. Yeah. The odds, pure luck.
Pure luck and
strategy play or not, but no card counting, none of that funny stuff.
Well, I was about to say the eye in the sky watches us all. At one point you have to be like, all right, let's see if there's someone looking, counting, like what's going on here.
Yeah. And the lesson here is this: for that individual to get to that point, like someone making that money, why not stop at 50,000? Why not stop at 100,000? And it was just in their brain. They were wired that way. And unfortunately, by the way, that million got turned down to 750, $500,000. Our pit manager said, look, why don't you just take a break? We'll put you in a suite. And they didn't, right? And the lesson here is, look, humans are wired differently. The same reason he didn't stop at 50, 100, 500 is the same reason he didn't stop when he was going down, right? And that's just, it's a story I share, especially with those that are on a lucky roll, that call it a day, right? As you said, call it a day.
You got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them.
Right.
The great Kenny Rogers, right? I mean, it's a tough one, but let's talk about the flip side of that. Gambling, hardcore gambling is an addiction. How hard is it for you to separate the business side of gambling and gaming versus seeing a lot of the hurt and what it's done to people and families and relationships?
Yeah, look, I know me personally and most in the gaming industry and certainly our organization, we don't want problem gamblers, right? It's not good for them. It's not good for us. There's nothing good to be said about it, right? So that's number one. Number two, look, it is tough. What we know, all mainstream research shows, 1 to 3% have some degree of compulsive gambling, right? Which, by the way, is a lot less. It's not to be defensive, but it's a lot less than other addictions, right? Like alcoholism and drug addiction, which approaches double digits, right? But it is very, very traumatic, right? Serious compulsive gambling, which is probably 0.5 to 1%, can destroy a life, right? It's a vicious cycle. And by the way, almost overwhelming majority of the time, if you have an addiction in gambling, you have other addictions as well. It's sort of it is part of
it's part of an addictive personality,
and we do everything. We train, to look for it. We do everything we can when we do detect someone that has a problem to get them help, right? But ultimately, it's going to be up to them. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, and you do what you can to mitigate it.
It is. Absolutely. So let's get back to the power of relationships. And I've heard you talk about this in many of your interviews. I'd love if you could break down what relationships enable you to do specifically in the gaming and entertainment space, and why they're so crucial for an operator.
Is about relationships, right? Taking care of people, and then your most well, I won't say important, but your most profitable customers, the ones that contribute the most, are the ones that you literally have to have personal relationships with, right? And so that's number one. Two, just whether it's this industry or other industry, that's how things get done, right? And I've spent a lot of time in Asia recently where it's even more important, where face-to-face, Zoom doesn't work, right? Or Teams meetings, what we're doing doesn't work, right? You've got to be in a room with them, which is even more challenging during COVID, right? And you know, I would say this: it's that's how deals get done or don't get done. They've got to be good ideas. They've got to have great business models around them. They've got to be executed well. But none of it happens without relationships with customers, relationships with vendors, relationships with the government, you know. And at the end of the day, a lot of people
100%.
talk about it. No one denies that, but not a lot of people really truly execute or are sincere about it, right? And that's the competitive advantage, right, from my perspective.
You really hit the nail on the head there. So let's talk a little bit about those nuances. I mean, they're more than nuances. I mean, cultural nuances, international expansion. Like 30,000 foot view, Bobby, if you could share with us, what's the core difference? What are the challenges of building, operating, and expanding a gaming operation overseas, specifically in Asia, where it's tremendous? I mean, talk about Macau. I mean, it's a freaking island built on gaming. Versus in the States.
Well,
I mean, what are
you're
some
not
of the
on your
challenges,
home
core
turf,
challenges and
right?
differences?
And so you're subject to, you know, any volatility in government, right? You're subject to their rules, you know, and not only rules that are in writing that emanate from the government, but, you know, the rules of culture, right? And so you have to be careful not to misstep. I think it's essentially important, and this goes back to relationships. You have to have partners on the ground there. You can't come in from the West beating your chest. We're a successful gaming company. We've done this. We know what we're doing. Let us show you how it's done. That mentality will kill you, right? There's a graveyard of businesses in Korea, for example, that took that approach. Very successful in the Western Hemisphere and just could not do it. In Asia and in Korea. And so it's so important to have those local relationships and humility, right? Humility is so important there.
Yeah, let's talk about humility. I think there's a tremendous lack of it in a lot of the work that I see, where people just can't just be truthful and they just can't be genuine in themselves. How do you take that approach in doing business overseas in the humility?
Yeah, look, again, I
or is that something that's just always been part of your MO?
To the genes, but partly to the tribe, right? You know, and my mentors, right? It is our core values are all about that, right?
Values, Bobby.
It's all driven by those relationships. And so I'm very fortunate because if I didn't have the right mentorship and you know, surround myself with those people, I'm not sure how I would have turned out. So, you know, we're all impressionable, especially when we're young in our careers. And I was fortunate to have the right guidance. You know, as it relates to, you know, ensuring that you can develop those and sustain those relationships, a lot of it's communication, humility, a lot of it's communication, listening. Right, you know, especially in Asia, Korea, you know, listening to what they say first, you know, and consuming, you know, what they're saying, and you know, when prodded to provide input, you do that, right? But I think they have to know that you respect them, right? And that comes with listening, that comes with communication, that and basically following their cultural rules, right? You don't have to, but they know if you are.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because you come from such a strong tribal culture background, that it was almost natural for you when you went overseas to understand that you have to be part of their customs, you have to learn their customs, you have to respect their customs. And you mentioned something really interesting, and I kind of believe in this too, that values inform vision. How, you know, with MGE and your own company, Sun Gaming and Hospitality, how do you create a strong sense of vision for these larger scale projects and operations?
Yeah, look, you're right. Your values ultimately, are going to dictate what ultimately you're going to create. What is you're going to create. And so, for example, in Connecticut, we're very proud. It's one of the most successful casinos in the world at Mohegan Sun. It's a beautiful facility, right? David Rockwell did an incredible job designing it. It's an incredible experience. The
Right.
programming is exciting, but at the end of the day, when you enter those front doors as a guest, it's how you're treated, right? So it's a combination of what you want people to feel. And we always say, when you enter those doors, you want to be in a different world. You want to get out of your day to day, activities, the stress of the world, and feel like you're in a different place, even though you didn't have to get on a plane to
Right.
do it, right? And so, that's how we want to make people happy, and we know we have to design, build, program something, create an experience, and deliver a guest service experience that allows us to do that, to make people happy,
Yeah.
right? Again, driven by relationships. It's funny how it all comes.
It all certainly comes back to that. Um, Interesting. Let's talk about present times. Let's talk about COVID, how it's affected gaming and hospitality. Uh, it hit us like a ton of bricks. Tell us how you felt. Let's rewind it back to March 2020. First and foremost, considering that you do a ton of business in Asia, and I assume you were traveling at the time, you probably had a heads up more than most people. Talk to us a little bit about that and how it affected your industry and specifically your properties.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually not in Asia at the time it hit. I was in Europe and got back very quickly. I think if you rewind to that time, I don't think any of us thought that it was going to be where we're at today. We're still in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We thought, look, vaccine comes out, we'll be out of it by
We were
next year,
close.
right? Yeah, yeah. So, but it just changed everything, our whole mindset. I think there is a big difference, from our operations versus we'll call it a Vegas or Macau, in the sense that if you can get in a car and drive to it, we're in a much better situation. So we've been able to weather that storm very well.
That's a very good point. I would assume that the majority of the business at Mohegan is driving versus flying.
Absolutely, right? Now, initially, everybody's scared. We didn't have protocols in place. No one knew how to deal with it. And then over time, people got more comfortable. They understood social distancing. They understand now we have the vaccines for those that, get the vaccine. And so we're operating in a different environment, but we're used to it now. It's unfortunate we're used to it now, but we're used to it now. And so we've done very well. It is a lot more challenging for those that are driven by meeting, mice business, a large scale event business,
Yeah, that was my next.
yeah, and we're still. I mean, we were operating, but we still haven't completely rebounded in those elements, right?
I mean, I was about to say that has to be a huge hit, the meeting and event space. I mean, I know firsthand. I've been to a number of events in both Foxwoods and Mohegan in that area up there. How big of a hit has that specifically been for the properties up there?
Yeah, we're starting to crawl out of it, but clearly, a major hit, right? We have, prominent businesses that come in, a lot of meetings, right? And those just haven't happened. They're starting to come back now because we're all used to living in this world, but it's had a tremendous impact.
And those are big spenders too. But let's talk about some of the silver linings here. Coming out of the pandemic, coming out of any, we'll call it disaster, negative events that happen, there are those silver linings. Would have been some of those key learnings and innovations that you guys are applying moving forward.
Yeah, outside of, we'll call it, health and safety protocols and standards, right? Which
Fair.
a lot of them are going to be permanent.
Much cleaner.
They're much cleaner, and they're going to be.
We're all being much cleaner.
That's true.
And chips are dirty too, right? I mean, chips are. You got to be mindful of that,
yeah.
right?
Well, I'll tell you what. There's technology that's been created around that, where they're
a lot of the UV, right? UV light they're using, I believe.
That's a great example, right? Air systems. So a lot of the safety, health technologies come out, but a lot of it also mobile, right? Like there's been this huge progression of online sports wagering, and now in Connecticut, for example, online wagering, and we're finding ways to connect the dots between those that will play online and those that want the land-based experience. And I think that has really exponentially progressed because of COVID.
Interesting too, and as much as you're open to commenting, let's talk about some public news here. I'm in the great state of New York. We have a new governor that has stepped in. What is your outlook on the current future, the future of gaming in New York State with the new regime?
Yeah. Well, look, I think the big talk is the online, right? That's been debated a lot. There's always the question about whether, New York City is going to have table games, going to have new resorts outside what's already existing in Queens and the Bronx, but
Long Island.
Yeah. But I think really the hot topic is online. I think, look, it's inevitable. Every prognosticator has their own handicap on this, but I think in the next year or two, you're going to see online gaming launched in New York.
I know, but it's such a difference. Like my wife and I, we're not big gamblers, but we do enjoy it occasionally. We love sitting down at a blackjack table and having that experience. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's invigorating. And we always talk about knowing what you could afford to lose. Yeah. And if you go in with that mindset and you just have a good time of it. So I hope it certainly comes back there. I want to shift the conversation and talk a little bit about you personally and your motivators there. And I read an interview with your alma mater that the book Built to Sell by Jim Collins is one of your most frequently referenced books. What is it about that book that you feel the need to revisit frequently and so often, and those really key feelings and learnings that you get from it?
Yeah. Built to Last is a classic. It's something that we've all, as an organization focused on. I think there's so many takeaways, but the key is this. You're going to live by a certain set of core values, right? It's so important in every decision, whether it's a small decision or a major decision, that you don't deviate from those core values. And you got to truly believe them. And by the way, everyone in the organization does. They have to be accountable. And maybe there's not a right fit. And if there's not a right fit, those people cannot be a part of the organization. And that sounds kind of cruel, but at the end of the day, that's the glue. That's who you are. And by the way, our core values emanate hundreds of years from the tribe. And so you cannot deviate from those in any of your, elements of the organization, right? And so that, I think, is the key takeaway. Big. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but that's the key takeaway.
Really interesting. And let's bring it home here. I mean, you've had quite the career, and the career is still ongoing. And who would you say has been the most important mentor for you professionally?
Yeah. So again, I was very fortunate when I was young, transitioning from a general counsel into an executive in operations, and then ultimately a CEO in properties, CEO in the corporate world. My first boss, if you will, in the operations was a gentleman named Bill Velardo. He's now deceased, just an incredible guy. In the gaming industry, where you have the Trumps and the Steve Wyns and all the Sheldon Adelsons, there's a lot of ego out there, right? There's a lot of ego out there, and you can fall into that trap. I was very fortunate to have someone who was super successful. This is a guy that worked directly for Steve Wynn in Vegas and directly for Donald Trump in Atlantic City. Very few have ever done that. And yet such a humble man, someone who taught me the value by living it of what leadership's about. It is about humility. It's about relationships. It's about respect, a respect of not only those team members that report to you, but those vendors, all the people you work with all the time. And I saw that day to day, and I'm glad. I'm not sure how it would have turned out if I didn't have someone who mentored me in that way. And so I've always been super appreciative of having a leader like that in my very early stages of the career.
I love it. And flipping that back around now, talk to us a little bit about how you mentor others in your world right now.
Yeah, look, that's my favorite thing to do. So I still have, conversations on a weekly basis with some of the folks that, some of my team, even at different properties, different locations, who grew within the organization and became CEOs and leaders in the organization. To me, how I measure my success is based on the success of those that worked with me,
Awesome.
right? There's no greater gratification. And so when I talk to them, we have those conversations. How are the team members that you're mentoring doing, right? And so for me, continuing those conversations and those relationships, getting to see them in person in these events, and then also in my own world, right? As we build companies, right? Doing the same thing again, right? To me, there's just no greater feeling, no greater measurement of success.
Oh, I love it. That's tremendous there. And Bobby, what is the single greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every single day? It could be a mantra. It could be one of these things that you repeat when you're out the door in the morning. It could be one of those things when you turn on your computer and you're answering your first emails. What is that piece of advice that you take with you every single day?
To me, is focus on relationships. Focus on relationships, and especially when you don't have to, right? When you don't need a favor, when times are tough with someone, right? And things aren't going, that's when relationships matter the most.
The word that stands out to me, that's been resonating with me the last couple of years, and I talk about this a lot, Bobby, is the word invaluable. And I think you just described the definition of the word invaluable. Being there to provide value to somebody without asking for something in return, without having a handout, just being there to facilitate, to build, to foster that relationship. And Bobby, last but not least, you look back on your life and career, and you've been through it. You've been through the ringer. You've seen the best. You've seen the worst of times. You've been through economic downfall, disasters, pandemics, building, rebuilding. And in those moments when you had to pull yourself up from a business perspective, from a personal perspective, and harness that inner tenacity that all great leaders like yourself have. And on the flip side of that, today you're sitting on this business that you've built, this world. You're still close to the tribe and ensuring all those values. How do you stay focused? What is your compass? Bobby Soper, what is your North Star?
Yeah. For me, it's always ensuring that each day that the core values that are important to me, that I'm living by. Every decision I make, and again, this is something that is not only in the DNA, but it's something that I'm very fortunate to be part of a family that has always believed in that every decision I make every day, I do not deviate from those core values, no matter how tough or challenging it is.
Good stuff. Bobby, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Where could folks find you? Where could they connect with you? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and then, anybody want to email me, bsoper@sun-gh.com.
All right, we'll see how many people start to flood your inbox there. But Bobby, hang with me 1 second here as I sign off here. I really hope that everyone listening really learned a thing or two. Bobby's had a great career, tons of learnings, really truly understanding how values from a real true tribe. And your tribe doesn't have to be the Mohegans. Your tribe could be your family, your people around you, your friends, your colleagues. But how do you really ensure that you stick to your values? Because I say it all the time, your how you go about life, your how is sometimes more important than your why, how you do things. And I want everyone to really think about, how you live every day and living up to those values. Guys, if you love this episode, please share it. It goes a long way. And you know where to find us all at thepodcast.com across all the social media channels. Thank you, everyone listening. Take care of each other. I guess we still have to stay 6 feet apart, but look out for one another and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.